Hi, I'm Sonya White Jaguar, and welcome to this edition of White Jaguar Wednesdays, my semi-monthly series where I discuss spiritual subjects inspired by your questions. When I completed the first draft of the free book that I have on Wattpad, From Actor to Healer, Alan Rickman's New Life as a Spirit Guide, I let my friends read it and I asked for their feedback. One of the questions that I asked them was, what subjects are you interested in hearing more about? Now, one of my friends who is more left-brained and a deeper thinker, he said, I'd like to know more about space and time and the fabric of reality. Now, I've long had an interest in this subject too, and although by no means am I an expert, I am not a physicist. Alan and I did talk about this subject back when I first met him in 2016, and I have some notes, but I felt that material was a little too deep for that first book, and I plan to include it in a sequel, which I'm working on now. I asked Alan if we could talk about space and time for today's video and expand on our earlier conversations, and he agreed. We talked for hours earlier this week, and I've condensed our talk into a few pages of notes here. Now, needless to say, space and time are big subjects. From a scientific standpoint, we've learned a great deal about space and time over the past century, but even modern physicists will admit that we don't fully understand them. Now, Alan has provided some additional insights from his perspective in the higher dimension outside of space and time. And so first, what I'll do is I'll share a few notes summarizing what I've learned from modern science about space and time, and then I'll share the conversation that I had with Alan earlier this week. Okay, so here's what I wrote down. Space and time were once believed to be two separate things, independent of each other, and until the early 20th century when physicist Albert Einstein showed that space and time are linked. His signature theories, which you've probably heard of, are the theory of special relativity and the theory of general relativity. Simply put, what those say is that the greater your speed, your experience of time will slow down. And also the greater the pull of gravity, also time will move slower for you too. So in other words, our experience of space and time is relative. Now this was revolutionary at the time, but when Einstein's theories were proven to be correct, this led to our universe being conceptualized as a four-dimensional space-time continuum, which I'm sure you've heard of too, consisting of length, width, height, and time. Okay, so now on to the conversation that I had with Alan this week. So I started off by asking him, what is space and is it an illusion? So here's what he said. Space is the physical container of the world you live in. It is real in the sense that it has properties that can be measured. In your day-to-day world, you take space and time for granted, but they are relative, as scientists have proven. Space can indeed be stretched, twisted, and compressed. And some of these effects are observable in the cosmos with high-powered instruments. I said, yes, we've seen how light is bent around large objects like galaxies and black holes. We know that space is not static, it's mutable. Alan said, yes, and there's more to it than you can observe with your 5 physical senses. I said, science has provided a lot of insight over the past century. Quantum mechanics explains what's happening at the subatomic level, and Einstein's theories of relativity work well on larger scales. There are newer theories that attempt to unify quantum mechanics and Einstein's theories, which each on their own do a great job explaining the fabric of reality. They're well proven by scientific experiments, but when physicists try to combine them, the math doesn't work. So there's still a gap in scientists' knowledge. For decades, scientists have been playing with string theory and an offshoot of that called M theory, in an attempt to bring quantum mechanics and relativity together. String theory proposes that tiny strings may be the fundamental building block of everything. It's just a theory, and there's no consensus in the scientific community. But what intrigues me about the theory is the idea that space may have more than the 3 dimensions we're familiar with, height, width, and depth. I read that string theory suggests that space may have something like 6 additional dimensions. Is that true? Does space have more than 3 dimensions? And what about string theory? Does it accurately depict the fabric of our reality? Alan said, you may be surprised to hear this, but space has infinite dimensions. If you could shrink down to the size of a subatomic particle, you would be amazed at how much potential there is for life in other dimensions on that level. The same is true if you could expand to the size of a galaxy and explore space at that magnitude. There truly are no limits for what can be achieved in the world of space and time. It is a playground that has an infinite number of games, if you will. The more that you evolve and your understanding of the world around you evolves, the more that space and time evolve as well. You see, you grow together. While in a physical body, you are part of space and time. There is nothing you can do that cannot influence space and time around you. You are not separate from it. Space and time are manifestations of consciousness just as you are. So if everything that you can observe is consciousness, are you separate from it? Moreover, are space and time really just an extension of yourself? That's yet another way of saying what science has proven, which is that space and time are relative to the observer. And to answer your last question, consciousness, not strings, is the fundamental building block of the universe. Until new instruments are invented that can measure consciousness, science will remain in the dark about it. Still thinking about quantum physics, then I said to Alan, okay, quantum mechanics has proven something called entanglement. Two particles that are together become entangled, and then when they're separated, it's as if they're still in communication. No matter how far apart they are, when you make an observation of, say, the spin of one particle, then the other instantly has the same spin. So information doesn't have time to travel through space and communicate with the other particle. Interestingly, Einstein didn't like the idea of entanglement. He called it spooky action at a distance. You might have heard of that. He thought there must be some other explanation, but nevertheless, science has proven that entanglement is real, and Einstein was wrong. While we thought that nothing travels faster than the speed of light, entanglement shows that faster than light travel is possible, and it shows that space is non-local. When I learned various healing methods, not the least of which is Reiki, I learned that we could perform distance healing. Now, as an aside, I'll remind you that Alan and I do distance healing. I remember practicing distance healing with a fellow Reiki Level 2 student back when I was learning Reiki. We were each in our own homes, and we agreed to work on each other at a particular time. We talked on the phone and decided who would go first, and then we hung up. My partner went first. I laid down on my couch and relaxed, and I felt when he started working on me, I felt him working on particular parts of my body, and I felt when he finished. Then a moment later, he called me on the phone to tell me what he'd done. When we switched, and then I worked on him, and then when he called me and he said the same, that he'd felt what I was doing, and he felt when I stopped. So we each had felt each other's actions instantaneously. So I've been doing distance healing now for about 16 years, and many other healers I know do distance healing. Distance healing is no different than a healing in person. So like scientists' experiments with entanglement, distance healing also proves that space is non-local. Healing travels faster than the speed of light. We can use our mind to affect something instantly across distances. In fact, it was around the time that I started learning spiritual healing that I started to develop a deeper interest in modern physics, because I knew that there had to be a physical explanation. So, do distance healing and entanglement prove that our reality is a hologram? I'm asking Alan this. I've heard that term used. Is that accurate? I think of consciousness projecting itself into the physical dimension in the form of space and matter and energy, etc. And while we see all these different forms of life, like trees, animals, planets, galaxies, these are all just projections of consciousness. The fundamental building block, as you said, is the same. The different forms are an illusion. So Alan replied to me and he said, yes and no. I like the term hologram, and I understand what you're trying to say. However, it's more than that. You can use the term, and I agree it works, with the understanding that you have of the nature of consciousness. The universe that you see and don't see is alive with consciousness. It's more than a projection like a hologram. A hologram implies a separation between the image and the projector. There is no separation. As it relates to the universe and consciousness, the image and the projector are one and the same. It's not that one is an illusion. They are one and the same. I said, could we use the human body as an analogy? For example, we've named these different projections of our body, fingers, thumb, nose, ears, and identified their separate functions. But they're all part of the human body. They're not separate in that sense. And Alan said, yes, that's accurate. I like that analogy. When you touch something like the sharp edge of a knife or the soft texture of satin fabric, it may be only one finger that makes contact with that surface, but your whole body is aware of it. I said, so the whole universe is aware of itself. And Alan said, more than that, everything is aware. Those of us here in this dimension are aware too. We are not separate from your world. I said, yes, I realize that. That's why we're able to have a conversation like this. I'd like to talk about the higher dimension in our next video. So after this, I asked Alan about time. I said, what is time? Is it an illusion? Is it merely an additional property of space, like the 3 dimensions of height, width, and depth? And so here's what Alan said. He said, time is the measurement of your movement through your life. That's all it is. In your world, you measure time by the rotation of the Earth and the Earth's revolution around the sun. This is nothing more than the movement of the Earth through its life. Time, as you measure it, is a form of movement, just like the movement through the dimensions of height, moving up and down, width, moving side to side, and depth, moving backward and forward. The movement through time tracks the physical movement, that's all. Einstein correctly recognized that time and space are intrinsically linked, and that the manipulation of one affects the other. It is more accurate to call your world 4-dimensional space-time. So then I asked him, is time infinite like space? He said, as time is a measurement of movement through space, if there is no movement through space, then there is no time. Space can exist without time, but time cannot exist without space. So I said, you mentioned how we can move through space in all directions, but we're not able to do that with time. It has only one direction, forward into the future. Physicists say that the math allows for backward movement in time, but that's not what we experience in life. Some think that the movement forward was set by the Big Bang, and it's related to the law of entropy, which means that matter naturally moves from states of order to disorder. Can you explain why we only experience forward movement through time? So Alan said, what the scientists say is partly correct. Entropy does play a large role. However, the Big Bang is only part of the story. There is another reality beyond the Big Bang that scientists haven't discovered yet. By and large, it has to do with the properties of space itself. Someday scientists will find the answer. I cannot comment beyond that. Then I asked, is time travel possible? This is a popular subject in science fiction. I'm a longtime sci-fi fan. Movies like Interstellar, for example, demonstrate time travel into the future by using the enormous gravity of a black hole, which slows down time in its vicinity. So Alan said, I don't know all the answers here. I know that everything is theoretically possible according to the laws of physics in your world. From a higher perspective, beyond the realm of time and space where I am, time flows differently. And in a very high dimension, even higher than where I am, time, as you understand it, could be said to be non-existent, where everything is happening simultaneously. Souls have the ability to time travel. While time flows in a straight line in your world, souls between incarnations are not limited to selecting lifetimes that flow in time order. In other words, you could choose to incarnate in the 21st century, then back in the 18th century, and then move forward to the 22nd century. That choice is up to the soul. The soul chooses lifetimes based on what will most help it to learn lessons and evolve. That doesn't require following the flow of time on Earth. I said, that's very interesting. So we already are time travelers. But in our everyday waking reality here on Earth, most of us don't remember any other lives, either from the past or the future. So do souls in your dimension have access to view the past and the future? So he said, in a limited sense, we can review our past lives. At times, we can see the unfolding of events in your world that stand out. We are allowed to see what will benefit us as it relates to selecting a life for incarnation. Even the guides who work closely with incarnating souls have limited vision in that regard. I too can only see so much. I see what helps me to do my work as a guide. But as I said, even in higher dimensions, the perspective is much grander and time collapses, so to speak, allowing those at that level to see everything that there ever was, is, and will be. I am not at that level. All right, so that's what Alan said, and we'll talk more about the higher dimension in the next video. I have to admit, I struggle with letting go of the idea that the physical world is an illusion. But Alan and other guides that I've talked to over the years, Alan is not the only one, they insist that I stop using that word illusion. During our conversation, Alan said that everything is consciousness, period. And in that sense, our reality is not an illusion. I'm still learning, we're all still learning, and that's why I'm asking for his help. Afterward though, Alan did add a parting thought. He said, when you play a game like tennis or volleyball or chess, is it real? Do you have a physical experience of playing the game? And I said, yes, I agree that that's a physical experience. And so Alan said, a game is not an illusion, it's an experience. And that's how I'd like for you to think about the reality of the physical world you're living in. All right, so if you have any questions that you would like answered in a future video, feel free to email me at sonya@sonyawhitejaguar.com or leave a comment below. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and you can also sign up for my newsletter on my website, SONYA'S.com. With that, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.